I've become more and more convinced over the years that what may start as a lawsuit, may start as a legal issue, may start as a criminal legal issue involving a member of law enforcement and their failures to meet the ethical standards of law enforcement, very quickly can pivot from it's a legal issue, it's about dollars and cents, it's about settlements and verdicts and about grand juries, but it can and should, I would argue, quickly pivot to what was the ethical underpinning. Because if we have legal liability issues, if the lawyers are involved, there's a very high likelihood that we've got an ethical issue as well. And I think it's also relevant to note in the last 13 years, not only has that become increasingly clear to me, but I am a very back to basics type mentality person in many ways. Not that I don't want to try to be open-minded to new technology, new approaches, new ways to do things, because we don't want to get caught in a rut of the way we always did things. Lord knows that's a great way to get into a lot of trouble, is doing things in spite of all common sense just for the sake of tradition, right? We have to have a healthy inquisition, if you will, an inquisitive mind about, well, why is it we do things that way? And I can often attest to being the person that's a bit outside the profession, especially earlier in my career, saying, well, why do you do things that way? And sometimes the answer is, we've thought it through, we've got very good reasons, and I say, okay, I'll shut up now. But there's other times where the answer is, I don't know, it's just kind of the way we did things when I came on. So yes, we have to continually be doing that, but when I say back to basics, what I'm really getting at is this idea that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. This idea that there's a lot of back to basics things here. The idea that as Samuel Johnson, someone I'm not particularly familiar with, but he's a British writer, and this quote is older than this country. It's older than the United States. People need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. And when I saw that quote, and I can't tell you the first place I saw it, but I saw it one place and I saw it a couple of places, and I thought, man, that is a hell of a quote. A lot of it really sums up what I do, because I don't think you're going to put on a 2-hour webinar and your mind is going to be blown. It never occurred to me. This lawyer, every sentence, every paragraph, it was amazing. He said things that had never occurred to me. Same thing when I fly across the country, when I drive to a different part of the state of North Carolina. We're located here in Raleigh, in the state capital. If I go to Wilmington, if I go to Asheville, if I go to Wilson, North Carolina, I'm not blowing people's minds with things that have never occurred to them. I'm reminding them. I really see that as a big part of my job, and I think that there's so much truth in this. You know, we know what the fundamentals are. We know what the basics are. Sometimes we need to be reminded of them. And over the last 13 years, I've seen different approaches at things that I think ultimately lead us back to a conversation about ethics. And I'm not here to criticize you if you're a chief, if you're a captain, if you're a supervisor in your agency and you've been part of decision making related to where are we going to put our training budget and where are we going to put our training time and priorities. Are we going to mandate implicit bias training? Are we going to mandate different cultural sensitivity trainings? I'm not here to tell you that you did right, you did wrong. Here's what I will say. I sense a fairly quiet but a very broad consensus. This is just from where I sit. That, you know what, we're kind of playing whack-a-mole with, well, is it implicit bias? Is it racism? Is it sexism? Is it that maybe we need to take a step back and say, now, wait a minute. Certainly we need to be very mindful of racism in law enforcement, of sexist attitudes in law enforcement, or targeting people or viewing people differently because of their religion and many other things. I certainly wouldn't dispute that for a moment. But how does that not fall under the umbrella of ethics? And if we look at agencies like the Minneapolis Police Department, the Minneapolis Police Department was on the cutting edge, if you will, of implicit bias training, of pronouns training, cultural sensitivity training. You name it, the Minneapolis Police Department was on the cutting edge of mandating that training. And yet, at the risk of stating the obvious, as someone that studied that agency for many years prior to the death of George Floyd, certainly no one that had advocated for those trainings would now look back and say, well, it worked great. I think what we really need is to be reminded of the basics of police ethics, to be reminded of remembering your why, of the honor that is in this profession, of the nobility of this profession. That doesn't mean that it's perfect, because it's comprised of human beings. So by its very nature, we know that there's going to be imperfections. But we need to recognize, I think, first and foremost, the nobility of this profession. I'm going to start with that and I'm going to end with that, because I think that's critical. If we expect people in the face of temptation, we expect people when they're given authority, when they're given the ability to maybe shirk their responsibilities, float under the radar, and not do their job, those sins of omission types of things. If we expect them to rise to the occasion and to resist that temptation, we've got to bring them into the profession, and we've got to continually throughout their career in this profession remind them that it is noble. It's not perfect, and things don't always go the way that they should. They don't always go the way that you think they should go. But the idea that we're going to say, well, policing has been terrible from the beginning. It's systemically terrible, systemically awful. This is a systemically awful department. And I don't know why morale seems to be low. And I don't know why low morale tends to lead to other ethical issues and other misconduct problems. This is not a new problem. This issue of forgetting our why. So I want to begin with that. I want to end with that. And in between, we're going to talk about the distinction between acts of commission, acts of omission, talk about the issues of bystander effect, talk about the issues of diffusion of responsibility.